All right. Okay, so the indirect statement is where we are today. An indirect statement is reporting something that someone says, thinks, knows, believes, feels, hopes, sees, or perceives. I will give you some examples so that you kind of get the gist of it. If you don't get all of these verbs down, don't worry. The takeaway will have all of the verbs for you, as well as the consequential YouTube video. So you might have an idea of what an indirect statement is. Let's start with what a direct statement is. An example of a direct statement: the sand is black. This is an observation, this is a statement. You can see it better on your screens than you probably can on this screen. Has anybody been to a black sand beach before? Where was yours? Jamaica. Very nice. Where was yours?
Hawaii.
Very nice, very nice. It's cool, it's like volcanic, that's why. We went to one in Tahiti on our honeymoon. It was like really wild.
It's like just actually like a beach. So
It's a beach. It's by the water. The sand kind of feels like softer, I think.
Water?
Nope.
Yeah,
Nope. Actually, no. There's no like temperature difference. It's just the kind of sand that's there.
It's weird.
Yeah.
I think it's warmer. This color.
Right. Right. Yeah. No. So, all right. An indirect version of this statement: I see that this sand is black. So this is an observation. You're reporting it to somebody else. You walk onto the beach for the first time and you say, oh, I see that this sand is black. Another contrast for you. Again, you can probably see this better on your own screen than you can this one. There are men in the field. You can see them. They have two heads in the field. And then an indirect statement that embeds this statement is, I know that there are men in the field. One more contrast for you. The sun has set. By the way, in case you're ogling my rather lovely slides, I get my really nice templates from slidescarnival.com. You could download templates and use them in your own Google Slides presentation. Amp it up a notch, you know. All right, so our direct statement, the sun has set. You try. Make an indirect statement from that direct sentence. It doesn't have to be complicated. Okay, let's see here. I hope that the sun has set. Okay. I know that the sun has set. I see that the sun has set. Very good. I believe that the sun has set. I do say. You guys are cute. I know. I see that the sun has set. All right. These are all awesome. This is exactly what I would have wanted for you to write. That's exactly what I have here on this statement, on this slide too. I see that the sun has set. So you're expressing the same thing, but in a less direct way. So what do we need? What is necessary for us to have in an indirect statement to change it from a direct statement? You can write it in, draw it, or write it. What do we need here? Okay, we definitely need the word that. You are correct. Okay. There's more to it than just that, though. We need a verb. Good. Let's explore the kind of verb that we need here. That. Oh, feeling verbs. I like it. Good job. You don't know. You do need a report of some sort, and that. It's not a relative pronoun. You don't need a first person singular verb because you could say the students see that the sun has set. It just so happened that the examples that we had happen to be first person. We definitely need that, and we need verbs. See, hope, believe, good, which someone codified as feelings verbs. So this is really the clutch of the situation. This is what you need. You need M&M verbs. M&M verbs are known as M&M verbs, not just for the candy association, although it helps. M&M verbs come from your mind, and they come from your mouth. Each of those indirect statements started with an M&M verb. Now, frequently, as we talk about indirect statements, you're going to hear me use two different terms for these. There are M&M verbs, and then there are head verbs. Gesundheit. M&M verbs and head verbs are the same thing. Head verbs you accomplish with your head. Now, your head contains your mind, your head contains your mouth. So I will use both of these terms interchangeably. It's up to you which one you want to adopt for the future. M&M verbs has the candy-coded association. Head verbs might be more logical for you to remember. But these two terms mean the same thing. Well,
So could you use head verbs that aren't mouth, like heard?
yeah, absolutely. Yep. Okay, what kind of head verbs do you know already? You can write them in English, bonus points if you write them in Latin too. See, good. You definitely know the verb to see. Understand, hear, know, think, hope, feel. I like it. I don't know what's going on there.
What does this C? What does that C look like?
It's a C.
And then I love it.
Oh, okay. See, heard, wish, knew. Okay. Narabo, I will tell. Tiki, to be said. I don't think any of those are really what we're looking for. See, hear, speak. Goodness gracious. Say, dicere. Skio, to know. Digo, to say. Audio, to hear. Good. Speak, hear, know. Audire. Sensed. It's actually smelled with two L's and then ED. Doesn't actually look like felt.
Smelt. Smelt? That's like what you do to metal.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so here is a nice master list of Latin verbs that are M&M head verbs. I'd like for you to take them down in your notes. The first one that's given to you, puto putare, is a first conjugation verb. These are the reliable principal part endings of first conjugation verbs. After puto, nego, sparrow, and cogato, they're all also first conjugation, but you can just put a 1 in parentheses, assuming you know what the 1 in parentheses means. Yes, please. Okay, puto, putare gives us the English of like computing, right? Computer. Skio, skire, you've seen this before. It means to know. The opposite of it, or the negative version of it, the negative version of it, starts with ne, neskio, to not know. Nego, negare, to deny. Spero, sperare, to hope. How many people remember dum spiro, spero? Do you remember what it is, at least? Yeah, while I breathe, I hope. Absolutely. It's the motto of South Carolina. It's one of those things that sticks with you. Sentio, sentire is to feel, but not like to feel with a touch. To feel as in like to perceive. Yeah, exactly. Cogito is also to think. Intellego, intellegere is to understand. Dico, dicere, one of your must-know verbs, to say. There are a few more. Constat and constitit will most often be seen, will only be seen in third person singular. It's an impersonal construction. It is decided that we will go to the play. Ait and iunt are very irregular, and you will only see them third person singular. You will only see them present tense. Bless you. You would use or see ait and iunt when you have one of those generic statements like, you know, they say that junior year is the hardest. Right? So that's kind of when you get to that iunt thing. Procerto, habere, to be certain. Audio, audire, you all know, to hear. Cognosco, cognoscere, to learn. And credo, credere, to believe. Again, if you don't get a chance to, dot your I's and cross your T's, you'll get a takeaway at the end of this so that you'll have all the information in front of you. For right now, let's pause and take a fast brain break. Okay. So now we're going to talk about indirect statements as they pertain to Latin. We're going to start with a direct statement. Here's the picture on your screens. I would like for you to create a direct statement in English. What's happening in this picture? Use the men as your subject. What are the men doing? No, English. Okay, the men are stabbing. The men are killing, right? But who are they killing?
Caesar.
Caesar, right. It's more than a crazy party. There are knives involved. The men are yelling, that's true. All right, so let's go with the men are killing, but be more specific about it. The men are killing Caesar. Go ahead and write that down. So we're going to go from a direct statement to an indirect statement now. You can write on your screens now an indirect statement in English that embeds that direct statement that you just had. So the same subject, the same verb, Caesar's got to be in it still, etc. You hope? Oh my goodness. I see that the men are killing Caesar. Good. Good. That's what we were looking for here. I see that the men are killing Caesar. Yes.
Is it possible to translate without that? If you were to say, I see the men are killing Caesar.
Yes.
Is that the same? Is that indirect as well?
Yes. Yes. That helps you to separate the direct statement from the stuff that made it indirect. But you're right, it's not mandatory.
Okay.
It's just a good thing to start with. Okay, we're going to start rendering this in Latin then. So we have essentially 3 different elements in our Latin sentence that will make up this indirect statement. We're going to start with our head verb, our eminem verb I see, which is video. Then you have the word that. Hate to break it to you guys. There's no Latin word for that. It's implied. Once you have a head verb at the beginning of a sentence, then you know that you should put that into your translation. But apart from that, it's not given to you. And then in our brackets, we have what had been the direct statement that now we are embedding into a larger indirect statement. So we'll start with video. We're going to move on. All right. We have video, which is our eminem verb. And then we have that. And then we have the men are killing Caesar. The subject of what used to be the direct statement, or you could imagine that the subject of the second verb, the verb that's introduced by the head verb, must be accusative in an indirect statement. So far we have the component of an eminem verb, and then we have an accusative subject of the verb. So if you look at the men, they need to be accusative. What Latin word should we use for men in this statement? Go ahead and write it in. Viros, good, because they are accusative and plural. Excellent. Okay, so we have video, which is our eminem verb. We have an accusative subject. The verb that is in this part of the sentence is an infinitive. This is why you're so well versed on infinitives first before we launch into indirect statements. In a way, I think you can understand that logically, it doesn't make sense to have 2 verbs in one sentence unless you have a conjunction like and or but or because. So in lieu of having another verb that also has an OST mustisint, we're going to use an infinitive. The infinitives that you know have 3 tenses. The infinitives that you know have 2 voices. So you can render any of the regular verb tenses and voices and stuff with your infinitive instead of creating another verb with an OST mustisint that would be confusing. So which infinitive should we use for I see that the men are killing Caesar? Good, Nikare. It's a present tense infinitive. Carolyn.
So, for, would we just use the, like, we wouldn't have to translate it to kill? It
Correct.
would just be, you'd have to know that it's a direct statement. So you just translated these in the way you would, in the same
Exactly.
like, voice and text.
Exactly. So Carolyn's correct. I'll get to you in 1 second, Magna. The infinitive loses its organic infinitiveness when it becomes part of the indirect statement. It acts like a regular verb with regular tenses and regular active and passive voice. Magna, is that your question too?
It wouldn't be like, but wouldn't it, so why would it not be perfect? I mean, present participle?
Because,
Wouldn't it be like,
That would be the current verb.
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, a participle has to go with a noun, like it has to describe a noun, versus be an actual action. Even in an absolute, the participle was still describing what was happening or what had happened to the noun. Oh boy, my voice is like on its last legs. I have to do this 2 more times today. Merciful Zeus. Okay. So what we've been able to put together so far is a head verb of video, an accusative subject of viros, and an infinitive verb of nakare. Our resulting sentence is video, viros, nakare, caesarem. You can go ahead and write that down as the Latin equivalent of the indirect statement that you made.
Why is it Caesara? Is it just an abbreviation?
Great question, yeah. Caesarem is the natural object of the verb of killing, so he has to be accusative. I'm waiting for the question that comes next. Will,
How do you know which is which?
I love it. I love it. Will's totally on my wavelength. Yes, all right, so Will's question, since here in this sentence we have 2 accusatives, right? So how do you know which one is the subject of the infinitive, and how do you know which one is just the object of it, or just like a regular accusative object? Latin is not cruel. Latin is quite kind in this respect, in that after your head verb, the very first accusative noun will be the subject. So most of the burden on you then is to look at the beginning of a sentence and quickly identify an M&M verb. Know that you're dealing with an indirect statement. And then the very first accusative word that you see will be the subject of whatever that infinitive is. Now, to that end, you might see a version of an indirect statement that has the head verb, like video, viros, caesarem, nakare. Because, as you know, Latin is really fond of leaving the verb at the end of the phrase or at the end of the sentence. So it's very possible that the infinitive, that's the action, will actually be at the end of the sentence rather than somewhere in the middle. That's okay. The rule still applies that the first accusative gets used first as the subject of the infinitive, and then you can go on and use whatever other words appeared. Bless you. Does that make sense, Will? Okay. Okay, so what's the Latin word you're going to need for that in your indirect statement? Let's see where Friday morning brain is. It's implied. There isn't one. There is none. Just the verb. There is none. You don't have to shout. It's okay. Get it. I love, someone in period 1 actually wrote as an answer to this question, imagination. So yes, it is implied. You're right. You're right. I was just making sure that you guys are all on the same page. Okay, so here we have the modus operandi, the 3 required components of every indirect statement: a head or M&M verb, an accusative subject, and an infinitive. even without Caesar in the mix, this makes sense as our Latin indirect statement. Okay, before you answer the question that's on your screen, I want you to look at this. The tense of the infinitive obviously is variable, and there are a couple different options we have. So if we have a present tense infinitive, I see that the men are killing. If we have a perfect tense infinitive, then it already happened. I see that the men killed. Future tense, I see that the men will kill. So it kind of acts predictably, that there are 3 tenses and they work like normal tenses, right? So go ahead, you have multiple choice on your screen. Select which one is the perfect infinitive that you would use if the sentence is, I see that the men killed. Good. Nakawase. Awesome. Can't wait to grade your quizzes. Okay, but to continue the discussion, the tense of the infinitive, for the most part, is also dependent on the tense of the head verb. So if the head verb is in the past, which accounts for these 3 examples, if the head verb is in the past, then you have to be kind of careful about how you use the infinitive. If you have a past tense head verb, I saw that, and then you have a present tense infinitive, then you actually have to use killed because it has to happen at the same time. You can't say, I saw that the men are killing, because are killing is happening now, saw already happened. Make sense? In part, most of this is just English, conditions, that you're used to operating in because you write essays and stuff in English all the time. So if the head verb takes place in the past, bless you, and your infinitive takes place in the past, you still have to express a time frame that happened before the tense of the head verb. So then you would say had killed. Now this third, yeah.
So like, wouldn't it make sense to say like, I saw that, or not I saw, like I thought that the men like would be killed, because that isn't, even though it's like I saw, which is past, and then would be, or will be future, wouldn't that kind of make sense? Because it's like predict.
You're on the right track. You're right where we need to be. So hold that thought for 1 second.
Okay.
In English, if you start out in the past tense, now this is a weird quirk of English that you do need to kind of, hone in on for a minute. If you start out in the past tense, I saw, the saw already happened. It's done. It's a completed action, right? That said, if you have a future infinitive, usually you would assume that I would translate it as will. But a verb of will hasn't happened yet. If you say, I will go to Stop and Shop, I'm not there yet. I don't have a basket in my hands. So will hasn't happened yet. But saw already happened. So you have to tweak your English to account for the fact that the future thing also already happened. So in a weird way, this word would is kind of like a past tense future action in English. If you can kind of wrap your brain around that. It's a lot to wrap around. But this is something to kind of keep in the back of your mind moving forward. I saw that the men would kill. Now, if it were passive, you could say would be killed. That's fine. But you need would instead of will. Because even in your English essays, you wouldn't say like, I know that Thomas Jefferson will become the next president. Because will hasn't happened yet. But if you knew that, you know what I'm saying? It already happened. Okay, so now it's going to be your turn. You're going to try, we might only have time for like 2 examples, but that's okay. These are the 3 sentences that you're going to try out. You're going to try rendering them in Latin. So we'll start with the first one. The vocab is pretty straightforward, and you have a list of all the head verbs that you can use. So try this one. She thinks that the women fight. Or the women are fighting. I'd like to have a couple more tries in before we review them. Okay, so we do want to start out with a third person singular verb. Kogato, kogatari is first conjugation. We actually want kogatat. So kogatat is fine to start with. You could have also started with puto, putare, in which case you want putat. Whoops, where'd it go? Putat. Okay, next word out of the gate is the women. They are the subject of that indirect statement, so they need to be accusative. So feminas is what we were looking for the accusative of women. Concurrere does not mean to fight. It just kind of means to run together. But pugnare does mean to fight. So this is what we were looking for. You could have done the same thing with puto, putare. Okay, with a lot of these, you didn't really change them to third person singular. So just kind of be cautious of that. And then, just for the record, puellas are girls and feminas are women. This here, femini, it should actually be accusative because it's the subject. So let's take all those lessons to heart and translate this one too. He knows that the slave is fleeing. Oops. Oops. What did I do? Okay. I meant to do that. Okay, I'm going to rush to the responses here. He knows, skit. This is not the word for slave. You guys don't know this word for slave. Skit. Serwum fugere is fleeing. Good. Skio is I know, so just make sure you put it into the right person. Fugere is fine, although it does have two G's, two F's, excuse me. All right, skit is fourth conjugation, so it's not going to be skitat. It's just going to be skit. So skit, serwum, fugere is what we were looking for. I'm going to kind of rush through the last couple of slides here, okay? We don't have to do the third example. Screech out that. As we start using examples next week, we're going to start exploring the idea of tense sensitivity with both the head verb and the infinitive. And then a quick recap for you. There are 3 mandatory components of every indirect statement, so make sure that you're looking for them and translating them with this structure in mind. First, you need a head or an M&M verb, then you need an accusative subject, and then you need an infinitive. Giving credit where credit is due. And then there should be a quick thumbs up, thumbs down to let me know how it went on your end. Thanks for putting up with my half voice today, everyone.